your privacy accordingly. And with that, we'd like to tell you a bit about the lab. And I will start by giving you a bit about my background and my collaboration and involvement with this lab. And I'll talk some more about some of the other aspects of the lab. So my name is Anicia Street. I'm an assistant professor at LSU in the School of Architecture, the College of Art and Design. It is my pleasure to welcome you today. I invite you to introduce yourself in the chat and tell us where you are situated, be it the Caribbean or another part of the world. I have the privilege of doing this out loud, as well as, being very sort of proud to be hosting this with my colleagues, Fabio and Irene, who is not physically here with us today, but here in spirit. A bit about myself. I grew up in the Twin Island Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, hailing from the capital city of Puerto Spain, or Puerta de España. I was born and bred and nurtured in the hills of Laventie, a French village where my interest and passion for architecture began. My academic and professional journey is an exciting hybrid. It is multidisciplinary. I have a background in architecture, civil and structural engineering, and construction. And those were my fields of study and practice. And this background has afforded me the opportunity to research, to teach, and practice across all three. My research is situated in the domain studies of Afrofuturism. My research focuses on heritage preservation and building technology practices within African diaspora communities, and that is throughout the southern US, the Caribbean, and Latin America. I seek to engage in formal as well as informal design processes that promote innovative, sustainable, and equitable built environments for the future. Additionally, I have an insatiable passion for dance and fashion, and I've professionally instructed in both, and I embrace the intersection of all my interests. I co-direct the Caribbean Spatial Justice Lab with my colleagues from the School of Architecture, Fabio Capra Rivero and Irene Brisson. We are joined in this initiative by an interdisciplinary group of LSU faculty, and we invite anyone from LSU or other institutions interested in joining us to reach out. You can learn more about our plans at our website, and this will be pasted in the chat. So we understand the Caribbean as a broad region. It's an archipelagic concept that coincides with other frames like the Black Atlantic or Plantation America, including Louisiana and the Gulf Coast, and coastal regions of Central and Southern America. The Caribbean Spatial Justice Lab was founded as a transdisciplinary collaborative center for research and design concerning the constructed environments of the Caribbean. We are supported by an LSU Provost Big Idea Seed Grant, and I have to echo this, as has been echoed before. We think it's truly a big idea. The LSU School of Architecture, and of course, our board networks of friends, family, and colleagues. We hope to create a transdisciplinary network of scholars, professionals, and organizations focused on environments and communities of the Greater Caribbean. We launched the lab with the Caribbean Futures Workshop in February 2023, gathering scholars and practitioners from Haiti, Venezuela, Puerto Rico, Brazil, Uruguay, and the United States at LSU to work with students to learn and envision potential futures in the context of accelerating climate change, insights across the Caribbean. And you can see the outcomes of this workshop on our website. And to talk a little bit more about this colloquium series, so we are hosting this series online because we wish to encourage an interdisciplinary and international and multilingual conversation about spatial justice in the Caribbean. Above all, this is intended to be a series of introductions and the beginning of a dialogue that we hope will last for many years. Resisting a legacy of isolation reinforced by imperial languages and political barriers to free movement in the Caribbean, we think it is a critical thing that we cross boundaries to speak to each other and understand the challenges and the strengths of the Caribbean from our many perspectives. Only then can we begin to generate innovative ideas and practical solutions for a just future in the Caribbean and globally. And I'd like to now sort of insert a bit of some thoughts here by way of a quote by Viv Richards, who is well-known in the Caribbean. He was a cricketer from Antigua. And he said, "The true Caribbean people are carnival people. We are vibrant people, not dead people. We like to be heard and we like to have fun." And so by this colloquium session should not be a quiet event. But if we were in person, I would expect laughter and sighs and sounds of agreement. Unfortunately, we need you to stay muted during the presentations, but we invite you to continue using the chat, call out key phrases, pose questions or thoughts, responding to each other. You may share references and citations, and you may do this as the spirit moves you. And prepare to share your questions and observations. We'll have time for that. So we will begin the core presentation by María Verónica Machado from Architecture Research. She's an Architecture Research Coordinator at the Universidad de la Costa in Colombia. And then it will be followed by our respondent, Filippo Veggesi from Co-Hark Studio in Switzerland. We will have time at the end for discussion. That will be 10 to 15 minutes. When we come to this point, it would be great if you could raise your hand to speak or put questions in the chat, and we'll make sure to catch those. So with that, I invite my colleague Fabio to proceed with the formal introduction.
Perfect. Thank you, Anicia. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I first introduce María Verónica Machado, architect and PhD in architecture from the University del Zulia, Master in Advanced Technologies in Architectural Construction from the Polytechnic University of Madrid, candidate for a Master's in Philosophy for the Universidad del Norte. Currently, she is a professor and researcher at the Universidad de la Costa. She was a tenure professor at the Faculty of Architecture and Design in the Universidad del Zulia for over 25 years. Her research findings on contemporary art and architecture have been published in books and internationally impactful research journals, such as The Ecological Cover as a Construction Material in Informes de la Construcción, Regaining the Sense in Kepes Journal, and From Spacing of Space to Mediating the Medium in the Hypothesis Journal. Thank you, Maria. Thank you for being here.
Hi, good morning and good afternoon. How are you? I share my screen.
Sure.
Can you see?
Yes.
Okay.
Just we don't see the full screen. We see like the window thing.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Before my conference, I want to thank the organizers for their kind invitation. My conference today will be about the ideas we have applied and the action we have taken in Colombia about the position that architecture should have by facing its quota of responsibility for climate change in the Colombia Caribbean. Although Colombia is not the country with the highest CO2 emissions in Latin America, it is the second country in the world with the wealthiest biodiversity. As inhabitant of this country and responsible for the changes in its territory, It is up to us to make proposals that regenerate the process of living ecosystem. Based on this idea, I have called this conference Planting Biodiversity from Inert Material to Fertile Matter. Let's start with a question. What does planting biodiversity mean to us? Planting biodiversity does not seek to impose models of life between living bodies and the territory, but to allow the regeneration biodiversity in ecosystems from different spheres. Planting not as an imposition, but as an act of resistance and defense of trees and plants in our soul, in architecture, and in the city. An equalization of their existence, a physical relationship between us, living animals, and those who have made possible the atmospheres of the planet as we have it today. This question had less 4 answers. 1, to vindicate the value of plants in the world as subjects of right that mediate the life of all the world species. 2, to defend their place in the urban environment. 3, to assert their existence through the teaching of architecture. And 4, to validate their relationship with our living spaces. Planted biodiversity is not the equivalent of naturing, since the latter use plants to soften anthropocentric processes. Nor does it mean cultivating in the sense of an economic and decorative use of plants. On the contrary, planting means taking a stand against the interference of dominating regimes and redirecting the course through actions that have begun in architecture to enable biodiversity regeneration. Why do we propose to carry out these actions of planting biodiversity from within architecture? Since its origin, Western architecture has based its construction on inert material, exploiting ecosystem and extracting matter from the earth as anthropic resources. Architecture has shaped mineralized ecosystem, which has turned its massive development into one of the modes of transformation of our planet that highly contribute to the process of pollution and climatic chaos. When we consider its emission, we must consider not only those generated by construction, but also those generated by transport, energy production, and other forms of energy combustion. All these emissions contributions correspond to human activity, mainly developed in architectural, urban, and rural environments. Architecture has also configured cities that centralize their capital flow movement from their early planning to facilitate the movement of vehicles, productions, and persons. And people, excuse me. Thus, architectural construction is one of the agents that threaten the earth processes. The production of the human world and the city have to develop it as epicenter of domination for exploiting the planet. Architecture has been erected as an aesthetic fact that violently imposes and counterpoises itself on living ecosystem. From a critical point of view of this mode of world production, we understand that the city aesthetic are produced through inert and mineralized material. We have created a world whose life supporting center is destruction. In other words, the transformation and decontextualization of matter, the extractive and exploitation of forests, the desertification of ecosystem, the generation of urban head island processes, the contribution to species extinction processes, and the contribution of the environmental pollution processes which have generated a significant geological changes. The generation of anthropogenic mass in 2020 exceeds the entire biomass generation of living species. In other words, the weight of inert material transformed by and for human beings has superseded the whole weight of terrestrial matter for the first time. Facing this excessive dimension of transformation, we need to think of other ways of building the world, insert from and with the process and cycle of matter on the earth. Conceiving and weaving from architecture as a means for life is far removed from construction employing the processes mentioned earlier. One possibility of incorporating life with the each can be seen in the process of fertilization for life through construction systems, walls, enclosures, and so on, whose configuration will generate a fertile texture in which each component of the environment will be a productive matter that will contribute to organizing environment or space in continuity with Earth. To speak of fertile matter is to understand the generation of the environment and architecture as a laboratory of fertile mediation, just as plants are on the Earth, mediating between the intra and the extraterrestrial. Then going back to the concept of planting biodiversity architecture implies exchanging material for matter, since the latter corresponds to the surrounding as an active condition that is in constant interrelation and mediation in the environment. That is what plants do, matter as opposed to material, which, as we have seen, is asset taken from the environment to serve a specific anthropic need proposed by an agent. In this case of architecture, the architect is immersed in anthropocentric regime, androcentric regime, egocentric regime, scopic regime, immunological regime, and patriarchal regime. In this way, the architect is the agent that breaks the link between the earth matter and the environment. He destroyed biosystems to generate necrosystems, which, as the name suggests, threaten the life of all species. In short, architecture as an ego build to destroy habitability on Earth. Plants live without ego and mediate among lithosphere, hydrosphere, cryosphere, atmospheres, and biosphere. In the case of wild plants, they live in apparent symbiotic, commensalistic, and mutualistic, overcrowded environment. However, it is quite the opposite. They live in correlation and interdependence among themselves and other species. From the loss of ego and the apparent interdependent overcrowding, architecture must learn from plants, which create our atmosphere as great mediator. Therefore, it is up to architecture to maintain the planet atmosphere as plants do so what the characteristic of habitability of our world do not weaken or even disappear. Planting biodiversity is committed to studying plants to learn from their biological composition processes and mediation and how the atmosphere, hydrosphere, cryosphere, lithosphere, and biosphere are produced, regenerated, and preserved. However, to get there, we have to go through a transition, leaving the inert material behind and rescuing the various forms of fertile matter, looking to transform a great deal of constructive process into fertile matter for planted life. Asking, for example, what would it be like to have a rammed earth wall containing a substrate from which plants grew and whose rigidity was obtained from the network created by the roots? What would it be like with made an ecosystem that existed, erased, and made a plan to distribute seed and land owners for planting? What would the architecture created from a conception of the wild world be like? To answer this question, go a little further. Any bioconstruction has reached because although bioconstruction work with bio-based material, it still use inert material. In this way, at the moment, we are in the middle of the design process, allowing ourselves to be affected by the living world of the plant and the interaction among this world, the environment, and other species. Together with Alfonso Trueba, we set out to plant an interspecies house in Barranquilla, Colombia. During this first part of the project, every time we repeatedly pronounced the terms interspecies house, and interspecies house, it made noise to us. The noise came precisely from the fact that if we were talking about fertile matter and planting biodiversity, the house concept is a construction fundamentally enclosed in an anthropocentric regime. And learning from plants, we know that what is proper to them is to mediate. For this reason, we decide to indeterminate the concept and redefine it as an interspecies medium. We indeterminate it in the sense that the medium, when mediating, interacts in multiple ways that escape from us and will continue escaping us in the future. The first problem to face is mediation, since it comes from the medium. If it comes from the medium and within the possibility of planting biodiversity in urban necrosystem, we must find a way to mediate. The answer was to avoid following urban regulations, since these impose guidelines according to urban model that favor the movement of capital and anthropocentric regimes. So we resorted to identify the types of soil the planets provide, the predominant ecosystem in Barranquilla, the lack of vegetation and distribution of native or naturalized vegetation, and the urban head island phenomenon. All these maps were superimposed, and by exploring them, we detect a space with 6 fruit trees inside it on a side. We took these naturalized and native species as the focus of action to promote the regeneration of biodiversity on the site. A regeneration in intimate relationship with human life, where humans do not take precedence, but they are at the mercy of the biological interaction naturally propped by the existing plant species and their companions. To this end, we turn to Marcela Celis, a biologist, and Gina Rodriguez, a botanist specialized in species and interaction in the tropical dry forests. And so any decision taken within the design for the mediation of the environment would let us to listen the voice of other experts and existing plants and their interrelationship, because it is within this interrelationship that human life is inserted. That is to say, favoring the development of the environment without interference. This route has taken us to an learning process of the methods and procedures of architectural design and planning. These processes move away from the geometric composition used in architecture to impose the configuration of building. It has led us to an inverse function of locating geometry at the service of the mediation of our life with plants and the microsystem it can generate. This has been the case to such an extent that the less exciting thing about this architecture, it is geometrical configuration. What is of interest is how it favors biosystemic regeneration and how it is transformed into fertile matter that the plants that interacts symbiotically with the space found they receive to mediate their life with our life. In this sense, the aim is not to ecologize the architecture, but to make the generation of the environment biological. Today, it's not enough to build sustainable architecture to reduce exploitation and devastation of ecosystems, and while mitigate this damage, it remains inserted within these processes. It's not even enough to build sustainable architecture from these regimes wrapped in a forest that regenerate biodiversity, as in the case of Stefano Boeri Bosco Verticale, because although it contributes to regeneration of ecosystem and hydrothermal regulation of architecture and the city, it does not stop exploiting the ecosystem. From this practice, architecture will transcend from an anthropic review to an interspecific medium, a medium that will no longer be an isolated inert material, but an agent born out of the community of the environment in harmony with life and the living bodies it mediates. In this way, architecture will become a medium in which biodiversity is planted, whose aesthetic will be detached from the composition given by the inert material to become fertile matter born from plants, manure, humus, substrate, peat, compost, soil, and recycled inert material. The aesthetic of architecture just become biological. Living plant aesthetic and places the elements that make up architecture in fertile matter, fertile for plant species of ecosystem typical of a specific territory. Element presents in ancient type that appear as architectural exception and spontaneous appearance in architecture, a product of time at the rim of inner material which modern architectural technique has cleaned and cleared to exalt the cult of architectural anthropocentrism. From this point of view, the living plant aesthetic of architecture is a space, on the one hand, for the regeneration of terrestrial process where human exclusivity loses strength and its concreteness, and on other, for the reception of living species capable of sheltering other species in favor of natural regeneration. Furthermore, it is also a place where the limits of the space, which were technically qualified as an enclosure, will now be mediator depths. Over time, we break the binary behavior of nature and culture to become a continuity with the environment. It's no longer correspond to architecture the hierarchy of the first part of the term. Therefore, the texture of the world lies in its agency from the understanding that life exists in the medium. Life is always given in interaction, agency, action, and affection. It is up to us to understand that architecture is not an autonomous object, isolated and inscribed in the cultural context, but that the texture of the world is interdependent with causes, affects, and effect by its way of being on Earth, its continuity with the ecosystem in which it is stated, and its political and biological implication to affirm its agency in continuity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maria. Very thoughtful provocations. Certainly a lot that is stuck out to me, and I've been taking so many notes already, but I really anticipate the dialogue to come at the end in our discussion session, but really appreciate the terms you've introduced, terms that we know in our practice and our disciplines, but really seeing a really sort of provocative and innovative way in how you're asking us to think about the interactions, what our agency can be in these roles, and how we may act and even be affectionate in those roles. So thank you very much. I will now ask Fabio to introduce our respondent, Filippo Veggese. Thank you, Fabio.
Sure, thank you. I'm really happy to have here with us today Filippo, who I met a few years ago in Spain, even though he's now in Switzerland, a very good friend of mine, and I have seen his work. It's very, very interesting. Formally, Filippo is an architect and researcher working on the intersection of ecology and architecture. His work places a significant emphasis on seamlessly integrating wild habitats into urban environments, with a keen attention to addressing issues related to social acceptance and attitudes towards this ecological transition. After completing his architectural studies in Switzerland, Filippo gained diverse professional experiences worldwide, including Australia and Colombia. Following his specialization in ecological architecture in Barcelona, in 2020, he co-founded the Cohark Studio in Madrid. The studio is dedicated to creating immersive natural experiences within the built environment through innovative architectural design. Again, Filippo, thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting. Okay, is it working?
Yeah.
Can you see now full screen?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, so, well, thank you very much also to Maria for her presentation. It was very interesting and very close to what is the work that I'm trying to do as well. And perhaps my contribution today, my short contribution to the discussion is toward what does it mean to cohabit with biodiversity, or to use Maria's words, to live within generated ecosystems. And perhaps what is the role of architecture within this subject. So last year at the United Nations Biodiversity Conference, the COP15 in Montreal, 196 countries signed the Global Biodiversity Framework. And without getting too much into the details of all the goals and targets about this plan, the general objective is to halt and reverse biodiversity loss, aiming to live in harmony with nature by 2050. Despite considerable opportunity to enhance biodiversity within architecture, as we've just seen, what does it really mean to live in harmony with nature is something that is that simple. Does the field of architecture have to raise any concern about this? No. The reality is that it's not that simple. Perhaps this also sounds familiar to you, but from my perspective, in any architectural project or I work on that included nature from simply a green wall to a more complex ecosystem, the first reaction from the clients, from the people that are involved in the process is pretty much always the same. Is what about mosquitoes or other insects? For instance, here in Switzerland, where I am right now, there is a huge debate around wolves, mostly related to the agricultural fields. But when I was in Barcelona, there were huge debates related to wild boars and the problem that they were creating within the urban environment. And also in US, you have many problems with raccoons in the city. So clearly the relation between people and wildlife have never been more confused, complicated, or conflicted. So despite considerable opportunities to enhance biodiversity in our cities, encouraging people who might not have an existing connection with nature to live in harmony with nature can be quite challenging. Just to have a brief history of how did we get so denaturalized, anthropologists think or consider the beginning of this separation that can be taken back to the Neolithic revolution or the agricultural revolution. It seems that the simultaneous retaining of plants and animals, which happened mainly in the European Neolithic, has led to a more marked contrast between human and natural or wild environments. So it's clear that this separation between human and nature is something directly related to the way people reorganize the landscape or the space. And for us, as architects, this is a central point because architecture works with space, and we need a contextualization in space so that we can design it perhaps differently. So successively, this spatial separation has been intensified to merely just to keep the wild, to train some abilities that was not possible to train within the agricultural field, like, for example, war or all these things that are related to war. And going till the Romans, where we can find the first typology of building that has been designed clearly to separate the space for people and the space for wild nature. For people, in the case of people, livestock, and agriculture, to protect the space from the dangers of wild nature that at that time was considered just problematic for the agricultural fields. Successively intensified by Christianity, but more specifically with the scientific revolution, this separation was definitely the human were definitely externalized from nature. But more recently, in the 19th century, something seemed to have changed with Romanticism, and people started to reappreciate nature. And that's perhaps why we are here today speaking about planting biodiversity. This social and cultural separation from nature has had a tremendous influence on architecture, contemporary architecture and urban design, that merely, as Maria was speaking before, is focused on human exceptionalist design, prioritizing human needs and concern over every other species. This means that this way of redecorating nature or reorganization nature in a way that suits our human habitat preferences is quite problematic. Why is problematic? Well, because very few species like what we like. Very few species can adapt and survive in the habitat that we decide to like or to design. So this way of doing architecture is even more problematic because it's increasing this separation, this detachment from nature, because it's easy for people to not miss what they didn't experience, meaning a growing urban population that has no interest in nature or to cohabit with nature. The very purpose of architecture is to build oases of civilization in which nature is excluded, in which nature, the wild nature, is something that is distant from the human experience within cities. Well, today research and publication shows us that this way of doing architecture has largely failed, because every day we see more and more animals that are making their way to our cities. Think, for example, about the COVID pandemic, where news were full of animals on the cities there and there. It was easy to see them because there were no people around, so they just changed their habits from living when people were not there to just doing on with their businesses. So unfortunately, this is not something that is clear to architecture, to the field of architecture, to architects, or even to who's teaching new architects. The statement that wild animals are part of the urban realm is still alien to most designers, architects, and planners. So the problem of keeping up with this human-centric architecture, continuing to ignoring the animal needs and the unavoidable interaction with the urban population, has even a bigger problem. While creating conflict, damages problems that are compromising the success of any attempts trying to promote strategy to support and sustain biodiversity in the city, but even outside the city, as we are experiencing here with wolves. So perhaps, to conclude, before doing architecture, we can ask ourselves, what does it really mean to be part of nature in the 21st century? Will we be spectator, disruptor, or participants? And if our intention is to be participant, like the project or of what Maria presented us just before, how can our architectural intervention be effective in engaging people to participate with nature, to influence their interest and willingness to share the space with nature? In other words, how can architecture include a biodiversity positive philosophy able to influence the way people live and perceive nature in daily urban experience, aspiring to a society that lives in harmony with nature? What is the role of architecture? And to conclude, to perhaps start the discussion, I was interested also to ask to Maria how biodiversity within architecture design can mediate, to use her words, with the inhabitants, with the resident of this kind of architecture, in a way that promotes a respectful cohabitation, rather than just bringing up with biodiversity, bringing up with nature. Yeah, that's it.
And thank you, Filippo. And I'll jump right into inviting Maria to, have a chance to respond to Filippo, and we can continue with more discussion and questions. But great lead in.
Thank you, Filippo. Gracias, Filippo. Voy a hablar en español porque se me hace más fácil
I'm
contestar
going to
la
speak
pregunta.
in Spanish because it's easier for me to answer.
Justo estuve escribiendo hace
I was
unas
writing
semanas
some
sobre la
weeks ago
diferencia entre
about the
muro
difference
y
between
medianera
wall
para una
and
exposición de un artista en
a
Barcelona.
fence
Y
for
precisamente creo que
someone in Barcelona.
justamente
And I
está
think
en
that
esa cuestión que lo planteaba ella en la
this
exposición,
is
una exposición de
what
arte.
he was talking about.
Y es que el muro
So the
flanquea,
wall
obstruye, obstaculiza,
is
como muy bien lo dijo
making
Filippo.
an
La
obstacle, as Filippo
medianera
said,
justamente nos
but
permite mediar.
this
La medianera viene a ser el mismo muro.
medium
Pero, por
wall
ejemplo,
allows us
entendemos la
to
medianera, no
mediate.
sé si
So
lo
we
estarán traduciendo
understand
bien en
it.
inglés.
I
La
don't know
medianera como el elemento
if it
que
is
está
clear.
entre dos
This is like the
espacios
element that
privados.
is between two private
Y
spaces.
justamente esa medianera que está en
And
entre dos
that
espacios privados,
sort of
cuando nosotros
wall that is
habitamos los
between these
espacios, no
two
la
private
sentimos.
spaces, when we
La sentimos como
we
un
are living
elemento
in a
que
space,
cierra
we don't
nuestro
feel
espacio,
it.
pero
It enclosures our
justamente
space,
ese muro no está
but
obstaculizando el
it's
espacio del
not an
otro.
obstacle
Entonces, en ese
for
sentido,
the
creo
space
que
of
nos
the other.
corresponde
So that's why
convertir
I believe
los
that we need
muros en
to
medianeras para
change
mediar.
the
Otra
walls
cosa importante
into
es que
these
históricamente
medium
nuestra
walls between
relación con
private
lo salvaje
spaces.
ha
So
sido
our
de
relationship
defensa
with
y
the
oposición.
wild has always
Y
been
justamente
defense
leyendo a un
and opposition.
filósofo francés
When
que
I
se
was
llama
reading
Baptiste
a
Morisot,
French
tiene un libro
philosopher
que se llama Modos
whose
de
book
Vivir,
is Ways of
modos de estar
Living,
vivos, modos de vivir.
modos de
Allí
vivir, ways of
precisamente él se
living.
cuestiona esa
So
idea de
he's
por qué
asking
seguir
himself
en
about
oposición con la
why
naturaleza
is it
salvaje
that
y
we
por qué no entrar en
start, we
relación.
follow on
Este es un filósofo que se
opposing
pone
the
a
wild
rastrear
nature. So this philosopher
la
starts
forma de vida de
thinking
los lobos.
about the
Y
way
se
in
va al
which
bosque, se
wolves
mete al
live.
bosque
He
y
goes to the
dentro del
forest,
bosque él se
and
pone
within
a
the forest,
espiar cómo los
he
lobos
just
duermen,
spies
cómo viven, cómo
how
comen,
they
cómo
live,
hacen,
how
cómo caminan,
they are
cómo
fed, how
X,
they
Y
walk.
X cosas. Y justamente
And,
como filósofo, un
and as a
filósofo, ¿cómo le
philosopher,
dicen a él?
how do we
Es
call
casi
it?
biólogo.
He's a
Se ha
biologist
puesto a
almost.
interactuar,
He
ha llegado a
started
interactuar
interacting
con los lobos. Y
with the wolves.
precisamente habla de eso. O sea,
And
no tenemos que
he
entender
speaks
lo
about
salvaje
this.
como
We
una
don't
condición
need
de
to
oposición,
understand the
sino
wild
que
as an
tenemos que entender a lo
opposition,
salvaje como
but
otra
we need to
especie más,
understand the
así como
wild as
nosotros humanos
another
somos en la Tierra.
species, as we
Nosotros en la
are
Tierra somos
human
una
beings,
especie más. Lo que
we
pasa es
are
que nos
in
hemos creído
this planet.
que somos
We
los
are
que
one more
dominamos el
species,
planeta y
but we believe that we
precisamente
dominate
esa
the planet,
condición de
and that's
ego, como lo
why
dije
we
en
have
la
this
conferencia, es lo que nos ha llevado
ego
a ser
condition,
lo que somos y lo que
and
estamos
that's why
haciendo
we are what we
ahora.
are today.
Entonces tenemos muchas cosas que cambiar y muchas
We
cosas
need
que
many things
recomponer.
to change and
Te
to
agradezco las
improve.
reflexiones
I
sobre
want
la
to
conferencia y te
thank
agradezco las
you.
reflexiones que nos trajiste hoy
I
aquí a
want to
colación,
thank you for
porque esto
all the
ayuda
reflections that you
muchísimo a
made,
seguir
because
fomentando lo de
we
plantar la
we can go
biodiversidad.
on speaking about
Gracias, Alicia,
biodiversity.
y gracias,
Thank you very
Filippo.
much. Thank you, Filippo.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you for that riveting response. We are at the point in our session where I would like to open it up for questions in the chat. So you can put questions in the chat. You can raise your hands, and I'd like to, give us some time. I'll give everyone online some time if you're still formulating any thoughts, questions, comments. Maria, there's a statement in your presentation that you made, and let me make sure. Can everyone still hear me clearly? Okay. All right. So you said that the architect is the agent that breaks the link between earth, matter, and the environment. And there's some words in that statement that, in our practice, right, we are familiar with, right? Matter, architect, agent, the environment. But this notion of breaking a link is what stuck with me. And I'd like to get just your views on, do you see that as trending in terms of how our future looks? are you optimistic that maybe there's a difference between that, some change in that relationship and that link? Does that link get, does it not continue to break? Do we establish, a very sort of different type of agency as we look at ourselves in the future as architects and designers?
Yo quiero ser optimista y
I want to be
quiero pensar
optimistic.
que sí lo
I
vamos a
want to
romper y
think
mucho más
that
como
yes,
soy
we can break
profesora
that. Mostly
y
because
trato
I'm a
de
teacher,
formar,
also a
aunque a veces
professor, and I
deformo a los
try to
estudiantes.
train, even though I try to form, but sometimes I
Precisamente,
reform the students. I like to do that
creo que
precisely
sí, o
because
sea,
of
y
that.
todo comienza
I
por la
believe that.
educación.
I think
Si
so.
desde el
And everything
inicio,
starts with
en la
education.
educación, desde la
If at the
desde la
beginning,
educación
with
arquitectónica,
education,
lo hacemos, creo que sí
architecturally
podemos cambiar.
speaking,
Y
if
por
we
eso me
do
preocupa
that, then
tanto
I think we can change.
lo
That's
que
why
pasa
I'm
aquí en
so
Colombia
worried
por la
what is
biodiversidad.
happening now
La
in
biodiversidad se
Colombia
está
with
perdiendo, pero de
biodiversity.
manera galopante. Y
Biodiversity
justo el
here in
video que
Colombia is
coloqué
losing. We are losing
fueron
lots of
16 hectáreas o
biodiversity.
24 hectáreas
I
de
think
bosque seco tropical,
16
que lo que queda de
hectares or
bosque seco tropical es el
24
7%
hectares
del
of
territorio que
tropical
había de
forest
bosque seco
we have
tropical.
lost
Por eso
from the
justamente
territory that we
traje el
had.
video. Pero sí, yo soy optimista
That is why I
y
brought
todo
that
comienza
video
con la
that we
educación.
saw
O sea,
previously.
hay que
Everything starts
replantearse
with
la
education.
forma
We
de
have to
aprender arquitectura. También
rethink, we
tenemos que
have to
replantearnos
think
la
once
forma de
again
enseñar
what is
arquitectura.
the
Pero yo digo que
architecture.
justamente cuando yo enseño, yo
Not
estoy
only
más
architecture, but
aprendiendo que
how to
enseñando.
teach
Y
architecture
una de las
also.
cosas
Because now
fundamentales es
I'm learning
sacar
more
al
than
estudiante
teaching
del
as
salón.
I'm a
No podemos
professor.
seguir
And
proyectando en el
another
salón de
important
clases
thing is
porque
to
nos separa del
get
territorio.
to take
Tenemos
the
que
students
vincular
out from
y
class. We
meterlos
have
y
to take them
experimentar
to
o
the
experienciar, que no sé
architecture
cómo van a
itself, to
traducir esto, pero sí
experience.
llevar la experiencia
We have to
a
take
la
them
afuera,
to
llevar la experiencia
live
con el
the
medio
experience, to take
natural
this experience
y
of teaching
entender
to
ese
the
medio natural como
natural
una forma de
environment, to
interacción y comenzar
understand
a
this
generar
environment as a way of
geopolítica a partir
interacting,
de lo natural. No
to
quedarnos
understand
nosotros dentro de estos
geopolitics
ecosistemas
with
mineralizados y de las
nature,
ciudades,
not
sino ir allá. Como digo yo en términos
maintain, not
coloquiales,
just
ir al
kept
monte, es
inside the
decir,
class,
ir a
to
lo
go
salvaje.
and see the world,
Tenemos que
go
comenzar a
to the
meternos eso. Y
wild.
los
We
salones no
have to
tienen que estar en los
start
edificios, sino que tienen que
going
estar
to the
afuera. No
wild.
sé si de toda
And
la
the
carrera, pero
classes,
sí de una gran parte de la
the
carrera.
classrooms don't have to be in buildings, they should be outside.
Filippo?
Filippo?
May I jump in quickly? It's interesting what you say. I totally agree about the need of teaching this way of doing architecture, and but it's many years that this has come up as a problem, and now like we are losing biodiversity like never before in human history. And speaking from my experience, I had to go in many places trying to do to look for an education that was going on this way. When finally I went to Barcelona in this place where I also met Fabio, there was this idea of doing ecological architecture. However, we were living outside in this semi-natural environment. It was close to the city, but we are like totally immersed in nature, and we were still doing architecture inside. We had like perhaps only one lecture was outside, and was the one lecture that I learned the more, and the one lecture that after that I built all my, if I can say, career. And especially because we were doing, for example, a project. It was a project in this natural place, in this semi-natural place, where we were speaking about ecological architecture. We were speaking about doing some stuff for biodiversity. We were speaking about enhancing biodiversity. And at one point, that professor from this class that was the only one that was outside say to us, but has any of you went outside, sit there and stay there the whole day to see what's happening in the place? And nobody else, of course, did nothing close to that. And so that's is the way that architects do architecture, sitting in their office and thinking, we're doing this, or going to internet and doing some research and stuff like this, but you don't go really outside, as you say, al monte. You just stay in your office, you do your stuff and whatever, and you hope to get some biodiversity in your building. And yes, unfortunately, also you don't have the time to just imagine going into the client and say, yeah, I'm gonna there in your land, I'm gonna stay the whole day looking there. You have to pay me because this is my way of doing architecture. So it's on this way there is the working timeline that is different from the natural timeline, which is also a bit contrasting on this way.
Thank you, Filippo and Maria. And I'd like to open the floor up to the audience. But before I do, I see Fabio has a question. So Fabio, please go ahead.
Sí, me voy a comentar, leer
I'm going to
una de las preguntas que pusieron en el chat, que
I'm
además
going to read
está
one
en
of the
español, así
questions
que
that are in the
voy.
chat that are
Dice,
in Spanish
muy
that
interesante todo lo
I want to
conversado. Siempre me ha
say
causado
it in
curiosidad
Spanish.
saber
It's
porque
very
cuando se
interesting
considera
what we
incluir
have,
vegetación
what we
en
are
alguna
talking
obra de
about.
arquitectura, por lo general
Sometimes when
se
we
escoge la vegetación
take
que no
one
involucra a la
work of
persona común
architecture,
o
we
la
try
vegetación
not
que
to
de alguna
involve
manera
the
solo da el beneficio
common
de la
people and
sombra o solo
neither
se
the
ve bien,
vegetation.
entre comillas.
Sometimes it's used only
Sería
for
difícil incluir
shadow.
vegetación con otras
How
utilidades,
difficult could
quizás
it be to
árboles
use
frutales, que no solo es
seasons, for
sombra, sino también
example,
son frutos, que se convierte en un espacio,
trees
una
for these
actividad
special places?
interactiva.
Could we take those fruit
¿Qué tan
trees to
difícil puede ser
practice?
un poco de llevar
Could
esto a la
this be
práctica,
possible
a la
to
realidad, en el
make
día a
them
día?
interact?
Y
And
asociado a esto,
how
yo quería
difficult
comentar
would be this
a
to take
ambos,
it from
porque conozco
theory to
bastante de lo que están
practice?
haciendo,
And I would
si
also talk
se
with
sienten
both of
solos
you
en las
because I
iniciativas que
know
llevan
what you're
adelante.
doing. Do you
Si
feel
ven
alone in your
otras
initiatives
personas con las
that you're
mismas
leading? Do you feel
preocupaciones, sea en la
alone, lonely,
academia,
or do you
sea
see
afuera,
other people
o
in the
si, bueno, si
academia
se sienten un
that
poco
work in the
luchando
same way
contra la
you're
marea.
working? Or are you fighting against against everyone, let's say?
María, ¿de qué empieza?
Vale, gracias
María,
Fabio y
you can
gracias por
start.
la lectura
Thank you, Fabio.
a la
Thank you
paisana
for
venezolana.
reading for that
Sí, es posible. De hecho, hay una
Venezuelan
ciudad, yo no sé si
companion.
es Sevilla,
Yes, I think it is
que los
possible. I
árboles
think, for
son
example, in
árboles,
one
los árboles
city,
urbanos
I
son
think
árboles
in
frutales y eso
Sevilla,
puede ser.
Sevilla,
Y hay muchas propuestas
the
también
trees that are
sobre
there
arquitectura
are fruit
alimentaria.
trees, and
O sea,
that's our
cómo
proposals
convertir las
from
ciudades
food
en
architecture, how to
en
convert or
espacios
transform
fértiles
these
para poder
cities into
cultivar los propios
fertile
alimentos. De eso hay mucha,
spaces to
¿cómo se llama?
cultivate
Investigaciones,
their
incluso
own
acciones
food,
sobre eso. Hay
their
ciudades
own
que ya tienen
fruits
huertos
and
dentro
vegetables.
de
So
los
there are
centros,
cities where
de los
you
centros
already
urbanos.
have
Pero eso
those
es en el sentido
planting
antropocéntrico.
sites,
Tenemos que
urban,
salir un poco también
urbanly
del
speaking.
antropocentrismo porque ahí
But
solamente
that
estaríamos
still
pensando
we are
en, si
working, we are
pensamos
talking
solo
about
en lo alimentario, estamos
anthropocentric,
pensando solo
but
en
we have to
alimentar
leave
lo
that
humano. Pero es
because
que también
when
hemos
we think
destrozado
about food,
los
we are
procesos de
only thinking about
polinización, los procesos de
feeding
germinación y todos
humans.
los
So
procesos
it's
que hacen las
still
abejas, las
thinking about
mariposas y todas las especies de
anthropocentrism
aves que hemos
from the man,
extinguido.
centering
Entonces
the
hay que
man. So we
pensar
have to
otra
think
vez en
about other
recomponer
animals,
un poco
about the
para poder,
butterflies,
si
about
queremos,
insects, to
conservar
every other
los
animal.
procesos
Because
de
if we want
habitabilidad
to
que tiene la atmósfera
maintain
en los
all
actuales
the
momentos. Eso yo
inhabitant
creo que es
process
una
that the atmosphere
de las
has, we
cuestiones
have
si
to think
queremos
about everyone, not
preservar
only
la
about the
vida no solo
human
humana,
beings,
sino también
not
de las
only
otras
to
especies,
preserve
porque esas
life
otras especies también
for
necesitan
humans and also
no
for
solo
other
los humanos,
species,
sino de otras
because those other
especies
species
para
also
recomponerse.
need
Y
other
de
species to
sentirme
keep on
sola,
living.
en parte, yo he
And if I
tenido que
feel
migrar a
alone,
otras disciplinas para poderme
I
acompañar.
had to
Pero dentro
look
de
to
la
other
arquitectura, lo que pasa es
disciplines.
que hay
I
una
had
fuerza
to
muy grande,
look
que es la
for other
fuerza
specialists,
mercantil de
because
la
in the
construcción
in
arquitectónica,
architecture,
que eso
we
es un
have something
muro
that has to do with
bastante
business.
espeso y
It is a
fuerte
bureau that
que
is
hay que
really
demoler. O
strict,
sea, dentro de
it's
la
really
arquitectura son
strong.
muy pocas las
The
personas, menos mal que ahora
business
conozco
speaking
también
part that
a
we have
Filippo,
to destroy.
son muy pocas las
In
personas que
architecture,
trabajan este
we
tipo
have only few distinguishing
este tipo
architects
de
that
trabajo.
work in this
Sin
type
embargo,
of
de
works
esas
as
pocas
we
hay
do with
varias
Filippo. For
cosas que
example,
sí se
Filippo is
ven
one of them. But
en el
those
entorno.
people, in
Y hay
other
otros
specialists or in
que,
other disciplines, we
si bien
see
tienen una
different
muy
things that
buena
we can
intención
take
de regenerar
from
la
them.
biodiversidad y de
And
mantener los
some other
ecosistemas,
architects, they
lamentablemente
want to try to implement or
formas de
to enlarge
construcción
biodiversity,
siguen
but the
extrayendo
ways
y
we are building
explotando
are
los
still
territorios y los
extracting
ecosistemas naturales. O sea,
and
a mí la intención de
trying to
Stefano
use the
Boeri
same
me parece
resources for the
fantástica en cuanto a biodiversidad, pero cuando
the
construye el
natural
rascacielos,
resources.
cuánto no
When you can
explotó y no
build,
extrajo
for
para
example,
poder
a
hacer
tall
las bases del
building,
rascacielos.
you
Entonces
did
ahí hay
an
que comenzar
exploitation in
a
order to
repensar una
do the
serie
basis
de
of
cosas.
the skyscraper. You are still
Creo
exploiting the
que es
natural
todo. No sé,
resources.
Filippo,
That is
¿qué
why
dices?
that's something that we are still looking at right now.
Filippo?
Yes. I also, from my perspective, I don't think to be alone in these things, because I always find people to speak or to work within this direction. Unfortunately, none of these are from the architectural fields. And as well, speaking about research, it's very, very, very difficult to get fundings for biodiversity-related researches within architecture. Even if there are thousands of plans from the United Nations, from European Union, from Switzerland, this is the thing I know, there are plenty of fundings, or no, plenty of speech about we need to do something for biodiversity. But then when you see, yes, but one of the main problems of biodiversity loss is architecture or the exploitation of lands, then you say, oh, yes, but not now. Now we are focusing on energy efficiency. Now we are focusing on mobility. Now we're focusing on doing more carbon-free buildings. And speaking still about sustainability, which is like a little part of sustainability. So yeah, that's unfortunately all the other disciplines, or not all, but most of the disciplines are already working on this direction. And then there is architecture that still look at glass wall and all of these things because they are aesthetically beautiful, unfortunately.
Thank you, Filippo. And I see we have a question from the audience. Machiko, would you like to go ahead and ask your question?
Yes. Hi, everyone. More than a question, I wanted to add to the conversation. I have a background in landscape architecture, and I feel like everything. Can everybody hear me okay? Yes. Okay. Everything that was mentioned by both Maria and Filippo, they're very tightly correlated with the approach that landscape architecture has. So it seems that the tendency of architecture is rather going towards landscape architecture. Maybe it should never have been a part in that sense, because it is the basis of environmentally appropriate design. I feel all the formation that you get as a landscape architect is based on the understanding of those natural dynamics of the environment. So I wanted to share with you a couple of things. One is an author. I think he is, I don't know if he was, I think he was an urban designer. Have you heard of Ian McHarg? Any of you? Yeah. So this is the basis even for the approach that Maria shared of overlapping those maps and obtaining those results. And I was trying to find whether he was for what you mentioned, Filippo, going and like living in the environment for X amount of time and actually watching it. I can't find anything on that, but it seems to me, at least to the best of my knowledge, that he is the closest thing to, or the closest approach to that of experiencing the environment before you plan. And adding to the question from, I think her name is Rams, or it says Rams Mendy, it's written there. Yes, these are often approaches that are very common. The edible species that are included in the urban areas and whatnot, but those come with other sets of problems, if you will, that people, for example, in the Caribbean, mangoes are a problem. Anyone who has a mango tree, they're like, it's beautiful, it's delicious, but who is going to clean all of this up? So it is, I think it has to do more with our adaptation to what we're willing to take back, like the mosquitoes, like the worms going, crawling into your bedroom or whatnot. And there are a few initiatives, for example, from Maryland. Let's say, for lack of a better word, the state has gone into research regarding the wildlife and all those wild species that just grow naturally, and they provide it at state fairs. You don't have to buy them, so you can plant your gardens with these seeds. And I think, coming from Venezuela, that's something that is lacking, is that you don't have the resource or the place that you can go and find those native plants. And perhaps we're lacking also let's say, like a practical case that you can go to a garden, like the botanical garden, and say, wow, this is the garden that I want, or see it applied somewhere. So maybe that could also help to foster this relationship with the native plants and all the wonderful ideas and approaches that you both shared. Thank you.
Thank you, Machiko. Thank you for that contribution. And I think, referencing, right, the landscape architecture discipline sort of make me think about, at the end, we're sort of searching or we're in service to produce something that has multiple systems, right, that are supposed to work together. So mirroring that outcome should really be something we should really aspire to understand even during the process and enact, right, during the process. So thank you for that. And you certainly brought up some fond memories about mangoes. Growing up in the Caribbean, my fellow Trini here said the rats clean up our mangoes. We love mangoes. Thank you, Michael, for offering that too. All right, any more questions? And I see María, would you like to say something?
Sí, gracias, Michael.
Thank you,
Tengo
Michael.
mucho, he bebido, o sea, esto ha
I have
bebido
lived.
mucho de Alma Heart. Sí, sí es
So
así.
yes, this is from Alma Heart.
Pero con respecto a lo de
But
vamos a traer mosquitos, vamos a traer
that if
abejas,
we think
vamos
about
a
if you're going
traer
to
animales no
bring
deseados.
bees
Pero
or mosquitoes
justamente
or
lo
other
urbano también
animals,
ha traído
well,
las palomas,
also
las
the
ratas y las
urban
cucarachas.
has brought
Entonces es como
roaches,
cambiar una cosa
doves,
por la otra
rats.
en
So we
ese
can
sentido.
think
Por
about
otra
changing
parte,
one thing for
esa
another.
es la nueva visión del
This is
paisajismo,
the
pero hay una visión
new
del
vision
paisajismo
that we
cuando yo
have,
estudié,
but there is another
que era
vision of
la
landscape,
visión del
which
paisajismo
is
de la belleza sin
architectural
importar si la
landscape that
especie
is
era,
just
me explico, nativa o no era
beautiful,
nativa, o
yes, without
justamente estudiaba las
caring
dinámicas
if
naturales
the
del
species were
entorno. Y
native or
Alma
not.
Hart, en el momento que yo
So Alma
estudié, se veía
Hart,
así muy
when she started studying
muy
this and
supeditados a los
writing,
otros movimientos
she
que habían.
was
Yo te
explaining
agradezco
that
la
this
intervención, pero
was
creo que
very much
justamente por eso yo
related
hablaba de
to
que la
other
educación, tenemos que
interrelations.
educarnos también para
So
aprender
it's
a
very important
convivir con los
to
mosquitos,
teach
con las abejas
people.
y con
We
las
need to
mariposas. O
learn
sea,
to
hay una cosa que
live
viene de la
together
educación y por
with
eso es
bees
importante que en las
and
universidades se
mosquitoes,
comience,
and
y
that's
yo
why it's
diría
very
que también
important
en los
to
estudios anteriores,
start
se
with
comiencen a hablar sobre
universities, and they should start,
tipo de
universities
cosas.
should start
Gracias.
speaking about this. Thank you very much.
Go ahead, Filippo.
Hi, thank you. Yes. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you very much for your question. And I wanted to add that the closest things to design that it exists to this experience of experiencing nature is related to landscape architecture, or more to agriculture, farming, which is permaculture. In permaculture, you actually try to learn as much as you can about your land to then design your cultivated system in a way that prosper or flourish with this natural feature that your land has. And also about, I wanted to say something about mangoes, because I remember when I went to Colombia, you know, a guy from Switzerland going there and you see, what, you have mango trees growing in your backyard? I was like, and I remember that just outside of my office where I was working, there was this huge mango trees, and asking my chief if I can take some of this mango for myself. And say, you have to go and speak with the owner of this house, which is the owner of the tree. And when I told him, can I take some mango? How much I have to give you for that? He say, what do you mean? You want to pay for that? Saying that is a problem, as you say, like the cleaning. But perhaps thinking in another way is not, we don't have to think about a street or a way of building that involve cleaning. What does it mean if we have some way of building streets that the mango can just go into the soil and not be a problem, generate perhaps an ecosystem going from there? What is the idea of thinking architecture without thinking about cleaning these things? Or what if we have a tree of mango? What does tree of mango do, and what how a response as architect can be in response to the way that mango want to live, or the mango tree want to exist in this way? And just concluding with mosquitoes, because it's a very popular topic within my projects, is an example that we were building a sort of water ecosystem, everything with natural plants and stuff like this. And every time we were speaking about this, the problem was mosquitoes. The fact is that we were not building for mosquitoes. We were building for fishes, for frogs, that they were actually diminuting the population of mosquitoes, doing a favor in this direction. So you can use nature in your project in a way that you can solve one problem, which this problem is mosquito, for example. There is this idea of this eat this, so that if you bring the predator of mosquitoes, then the problem is solved. Mosquito is not going to go in your project. There are more chance that they are going in other project because they left a bucket full of water just outside of their house. So in this way.
Thank you again, Filippo. We have time for, I would say, one or two more questions, comments. Yes, please, Maria, please go ahead.
Es que quiero decir algo con respecto a los mangos que trajo
I just
Filippo
want to say
colación
something about
sobre
mangoes.
eso. Es la biomasa de la cual se
That is
alimentan,
the
sobre todo las
biomass
plantas y otras especies.
that is,
Pero hay algo muy
they are
importante que nos
fed,
trajo la arquitectura
but
occidental,
something more
que también
important
está en el
that
paisajismo, que es el
the
bendito
architecture
piso.
brought is the
O
floor.
sea, el piso es
So
lo que
the
ha
floor
cortado la
is
relación entre
what
nosotros
stopped the
y lo
relationship
natural
between
y los
us and
ecosistemas.
the nature and the
Si nos
ecosystems.
vamos a la
If
historia de
we
la
think
arquitectura
about
occidental, y
history
la que nos
of
dan a todos cuando
Western
vemos historia de
architecture,
arquitectura, Grecia, el Partenón.
Greece, we
En el
have the
Partenón de Grecia
Parthenon.
vemos el
There we can
basamento.
see the
Si yo me voy
basement.
a la arquitectura primigenia de
If
la
I
zona donde
think
estoy viviendo, en
about
Barranquilla, que es la Guajira, los
the
guajiros no
Guajira
tenían piso,
and
no
Barranquilla,
había
they
suelo,
didn't
había
have
una
a
conexión
floor.
directa
They had a
entre su
direct
forma de
connection
habitar
between the
y el
way
suelo.
in which
De
they
hecho,
lived
ellos
and the
dicen que su
floor, the
casa es
soil.
hasta donde
So
le alcanza
they
la vista,
said
porque su
that their
forma de
house
habitar
goes
el
until
espacio
where
es
their
una forma de
site
habitar
allows them.
territorial.
because
Entonces,
the
justamente,
space is a territorial way
si
of
pensamos en los
living.
desperdicios
So
que
if we
van a
think about
generar
the waste
las plantas o
that
lo que
the
van a generar los
plants
otros
are
animales, las
going
otras
to
especies que
generate,
vamos a
or
traer
other species
a
that we are
colación,
going to
se nos
bring,
está olvidando
we are
lo que
just
muy bien recordó
forgetting
Filippo,
what
eso de la
Filippo has
recircularidad y de la
said,
condición
this
de la biomasa, cosa
circularity
que tenemos
and
que tener
the
muy presente cuando hablamos de
biomass.
plantar la
That's why it's very
biodiversidad,
important to
que yo no toqué.
bring this
Entonces, en ese
into
sentido, es
into
una
the
hipótesis que
matter
tengo que el
when we speak
piso,
about biodiversity. I
el
do
piso, el
believe that
suelo, fue
the
lo que
floor,
comenzó
the
a separar
soil,
todo. O sea, a
started
partir de ahí nos
separating
separamos de la
everything.
Tierra.
So
Es como
from
cuando
then
fue el
on,
hombre a la
we
luna,
got separated
vaya, fue un hombre a la luna,
from the land.
que dijo, fue un gran
When the
paso para
man went
para la
to the
humanidad, el
moon,
saltar e ir a la luna.
someone
Creo que el gran
said it
paso en
was
este
a
momento
huge
es
step
bajarnos
for
del suelo
men.
y
So now a
meternos
huge
en la
step
tierra.
would be
Creo que
to
justamente
start
es eso.
going
Gracias.
to the
Perdona,
earth, to the
Anisha.
soil again. Thank you, Anisha.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you again. Fabio, please.
Sí, creo que no nos queda demasiado tiempo, pero quería hacer una pregunta un poco que viene transversal a todo lo que se ha venido diciendo, que estaba tomando apuntes y decía que hacia dónde queremos trabajar o hacia dónde queremos progresar. Queremos tratar de que la arquitectura en sus tipologías actuales se convierta en parte de la naturaleza, o queremos traer la naturaleza a que forme parte de la arquitectura, si eso se pudieran entender como dos tendencias diferentes, o si por el contrario son cosas que trabajan como en conjunto y no es una cosa o la otra. María.
Yo creo que las dos en conjunto, o sea, nosotros como urbanos, creo que no tenemos nada que ir a hacer a estar buscando algo en el bosque. ¿Me explico? Y justamente lo que hemos dañado en el bosque, creo que nos corresponde reforestarlo y convertir estos ecosistemas que yo llamé mineralizados, que son las ciudades, en ecosistemas fértiles, en ecosistemas vivos. O sea, hay una cuestión energética que se llama la entropía. Nuestras ciudades tienen un nivel de entropía muy alto y los bosques tienen un nivel de entropía muy bajo, que son las condiciones naturales originarias del planeta. Y justamente hay que comenzar a equilibrar ese tipo de cosas.
Perfecto, gracias. Muy bien, yo creo que podemos ir cerrando, Anicia, si te parece.
Yeah. Yes. Always, very hard to close discussions like this, just because it's such rich conversation, and I would love to keep talking. I know I would, sitting over a bowl of mangoes here right now. That's my wish. No, Filippo and Maria, again, I really want to say that, you've presented, both presentations were very thought-provoking, in that you've asked us to, consider our role, our specific roles in our respective disciplines, on a sort of, it may be sort of local, regional, national, international, sort of global. But then you've also taken us to a point where you have asked us to consider how we even personally dwell. So, bringing up those very sort of fond memories of our specific locales within the Caribbean, and how that might be, how we might, sort of share those experiences, those thoughts, historical, cultural, social, ecological, biological. I think it's was a really sort of a multi-layered and rich discussion. And I, as I mentioned, I'm very sorry to have to close the discussion, but I'd like to thank you for your contributions to this third session in our colloquium series. And I want to say also to the audience, muchísimas gracias, merci beaucoup, muito obrigado. Messi, I think you all also make these conversations very rich and we really want to invite you to keep the dialogue going with us. We will be continuing this colloquium series into the new year. So just as a reminder, our next session is scheduled for Friday, February 16th, same time, 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m., and that is in Central Time. We will be hearing from Isabelle Joloquier, and we really want to encourage you to connect with us at the Caribbean Spatial Justice Lab, and we very much look forward to our upcoming sessions. We actually have one of our presenters online with us today. I'm very excited for the sessions coming up, Professor Michael Lepoy. And you know I had to give you a shout out, my colleague Srini. So thank you all, and we look forward to seeing you again in the new year.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you again, María Verónica. Thank you, Filippo, for being here, for your time, for preparing this discussion. And also thank you, Eugenia and Sol, for the interpretation. It was great. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Ciao.